to that is that we got a couple of comments beforehand from Simon and Chase. And it made me think of something Susan said to me at lunch, which is that people come here and they offer us a lot of comments, and Simon's comments on premature cord clamping and could that be a cause of brain damage? And I don't know whether it is or it isn't, but I know that, as Susan said, we can't study that question unless a researcher proposes it. And one thing we ought to look at is a path for the public to come here and express their concerns. And I hope that researchers listen, and some of them think before they hear. And remember that these are things we could propose to study, and if you're a researcher looking for people in the autism community that would want to help you in your studies, every single person that comes to comment before us is most likely such a person. And I wish that that was a resource we made better use of, because I think it's safe to say that every single one of us wants to be more responsive and provide help to autistic people.
Thank you, David. So I just wanted to make a comment again to Ms. Doyle's testimony, and that is, I find it sort of disheartening that there are well-intentioned approaches to trying to solve some of the issues that Ms. Doyle brought up. So the workshop on improving health outcomes for people on the autism spectrum that we talked about, we had a wonderful workshop. It was open to the public. We addressed issues like gastrointestinal problems, epilepsy, and sleep disorders. It was open to the public for comment, and there was a lot of positive feedback. We're trying to have a second one to deal with the mental health issues like anxiety and depression and suicide. Yet we heard in the testimony that IAC's not doing anything with this. So there's a disconnect to where if there is work that we're trying to do. I would welcome hearing from folks that are listening to us. We translate that information better, and I'm sure that Susan would, welcome other efforts to try and get the words out to the public. But I don't think it's so much that the members of the committee aren't well-intentioned in trying to address these very difficult issues. It seems to me more that we're trying to do that, but yet our efforts are not getting out there somehow, and probably we need to do a better job about translating it to the general public.
Okay, if we can return to have some discussion at the conclusion of the public comment period. Now we're going to have the reading of the summary of the written comments. And I want to remind folks, although I imagine this certificate Susan probably already did, about the needed comments for that after. Okay. Right ahead. Sorry, who's giving me Oni Celestin, thank you. From the Office of Autism Research Coordination will be summarizing the written comments. Hi, Oni.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. Since the October full committee meeting, the IACC has received written public comments from 17 commenters. For the purposes of this presentation, we've organized these comments into 5 broad topics. The committee has been provided the comments in full, but they will be summarized briefly here. The first topic is concern about medical practices and potential causes of autism. There were 5 comments received on this topic. Dr. Eileen Nicole Simon thanks the committee for discussing her comments submitted to the October 2018 IACC meeting. She encouraged the IACC to investigate several factors that could be contributing to autism symptoms. In particular, she would like the IACC to discuss the importance of the inferior colliculus and its susceptibility to damage. She believes that brain injuries caused by Wernicke's encephalopathy, bilirubin exposure, or umbilical cord clamping may contribute to autism. Mr. Dwight Zeringer expressed concern about the potential contribution of glyphosate to ASD symptoms. He also wrote about changes in his son's symptoms following modifications to his diet. Ms. Josephine Kraft is concerned about the use of electroshock therapy at the Judge Rothenberg Center. She recommends that the IACC advocate for changes to the standard of care for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Ms. Caroline Rogers expressed concern that prenatal ultrasounds and x-rays may be contributing to autism symptoms. Dr. Linda Papadimitriou Barsu is concerned about the potential role of electromagnetic radiation in autism. The second topic is vaccines and autism. There were 4 comments received on this topic. Mr. John Best believes that autism is caused by mercury in vaccines. He also expressed frustration with the IACC. Ms. Risa Warner is concerned about the association between autism and several environmental toxins, including mercury. She requests that the IACC call upon the Department of Justice and the Department of Health and Human Services to investigate allegations of fraud and obstruction of justice in the omnibus autism proceeding. Ms. Margaret Ewell expressed concerns about the childhood vaccination schedule. She believes that autism is caused by vaccine injury and that the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986 should be revised. Mr. Dan Fergo believes that a clinical study should be done to compare children that have been reported to regress into autism versus neurotypical children. He also expressed concern about the 3-year statute of limitations in the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. The third topic is the role of the IACC and the federal government. There were 4 comments received on this topic. Mr. James Kilpatrick shared a link to an online commentary expressing concern about the progress of the IACC. The commentary recommends the formation of a new autism task force and a vaccine safety commission. The commentary also recommends amendments to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, to provide more options for special education. Mr. Dwight Zeringer requested the IACC facilitate a survey of autistic parents in order to better identify research needs. He also requested the IACC make a formal request to Congress to investigate the CDC whistleblower issue. Ms. Michelle McCormick believes that the IACC should work harder to identify causes and treatments for autism. And Mr. Mark Spivo also requests that the IACC increase its focus on identifying causes and treatments of autism. The fourth topic is service needs, resources, and policy implications. There were 3 comments received on this topic. Ms. Whitney Ellenby shared a link to an online commentary advocating for an increase in sensory-friendly opportunities. Ms. Karen Hart shared several concerns with the committee, including the need for group housing with properly trained staff. She is also concerned that public schools' special education programs are not able to meet the needs of the increasing autistic population in schools. Finally, she wrote seeking assurances that the SSI and SSDI programs would continue to be available as her Asher shared a press release announcing the creation of the National Council on Severe Autism, a new organization that aims to advocate for the needs of autistic individuals with severe disabilities. The final topic is transition to adulthood and adult service needs. There were 2 comments received on this topic. Mr. Robert Johnson shared a blog post detailing the experiences of a young man with ASD who had started his own woodworking business. Ms. Benedetta Stillwell wrote about the various employment challenges her adult son with autism has faced. This concludes the summary. Thank you again to everyone who submitted written comments.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments by the committee on any of the written or oral comments that we've heard today? Oh, sorry.
There we go. Can we also just add the live feedback comments right here before we discuss? So just bring to your attention our first set of live feedback comments are at everyone's place at the table. We received 3, one from Carla Shepard-Ruthinger that was a question about the TRICARE presentation, a comment from Rose Walker with concerns about ADA, and a comment from Sarah Zimmerman about employment issues. And so just wanted to bring those to your attention, and we're going to be putting those up on the web shortly for anyone out in the audience. So just wanted to add those in for discussion as well.
Yeah, Kevin. I read with great interest the Caroline Rogers comment. Yes, a little closer to your mic. Oh, sure. I read with great interest Caroline Rogers' comments about prenatal ultrasound. I had done a lit review because we were utilizing or planning to use ultrasound for studying brain development. And so I recalled when I was at Yale, Pashka Rakesh and I had a conversation about ultrasound and autism. So I went back through that literature. It's an interesting hypothesis, and Caroline, or Mrs. Rogers, is looking for research on the topic. And so I wanted to bring to her attention, the committee's attention, there was a couple of studies done by Pashka's group looking at a mouse model where they actually administered ultrasound. It was an R01 that was funded by NIH, and the results were very interesting in the sense of changes in migration as a result of very intense ultrasound, so about 30 minutes of continuous ultrasound to a mouse brain, a fetal mouse brain. So you can imagine the analog to that would be a really, really long series of ultrasounds for a human brain. And they published this in PNAS. Gail Purvis was the contributor of that. So that sparked a lot of interest. And then the studies that followed this up, one just came out recently in pediatrics. And the overall results were negative. There was no association. We kind of dug into the data very intensely with the associated risk of finding things that aren't really remarkable. There were some associations between certain parameters of the prenatal ultrasound. But the problem with that study and many others like it is that unlike the mouse model, there isn't a randomized experiment that you could do with prenatal ultrasound in the sense that if you are getting more ultrasounds, usually there's a reason. And so those reasons, so for example, in my daughter's case, she was developing slowly and very small for the time period. So she was prescribed additional ultrasounds. I don't think it caused her autism. I think that whatever caused her slow development also caused her autism. And so there's always those types of third variable problems. So I think that while it's an interesting hypothesis, we're not really able to do the studies that are required to unambiguously put this to rest. But the studies that we've done so far, even with that compound, which would tend to make the results say, yes, there's an association, or saying, no, there's not an association. So I think the conclusion would be that we wouldn't recommend somebody foregoing an ultrasound that is deemed medically necessary because of a concern about autism. And it's always a risk-benefit ratio. And you want to say, well, what's the purpose of this? And what's the likelihood that it could do some harm? The likelihood looks like it would be very small, and the information gained could be very valuable in facilitating the child's development in other ways.
Just add that Lisa Crone also studied this and found no association. But I wanted to talk about the press release from the National Council on Severe Autism. We're really excited that this group has now been launched. I'm thrilled to serve as a member of its founding board. The group is really trying to focus on the needs of a population of people with autism who have been left behind. Those whose autism is severely disabling, which includes those with cognitive disability, severe verbal impairments, severe deficits in adaptive functioning, and self-injurious and aggressive behaviors. The needs of this population are very different than the needs of the broader autism community. And these are individuals who rely in many cases on their parents to be their voice because they are not able to come to the policy table and advocate on their own behalf. So people sign up on the Facebook page and on the website to get more information. So we know this is a group that's really looking for support. I encourage all of you to look at the new website. There you will find position statements on very important topics that are facing the autism community, including guardianship, vocational options, personal safety and abuse prevention, access to appropriate health care, including crisis care, HCBS residential policies, educational placements, and the need to include this population in research, which we know from a study published last month from Dr. Siegel's group in Rhode Island, this population of individuals with autism are often excluded from research studies, and therefore most autism research that we look at does not even apply to this population. So this organization is already hard at work to make sure that the needs of this population are accounted for at the policy table, at the research table, and at the services tables.
Thank you, Austin. David.
I wanted to make a comment now because I won't be here for the round robin, but it also relates to Dr. Simon's request for more postmortem research. So I wanted to give an update on Autism BrainNet. Autism BrainNet is a program that started initially by Autism Speaks and the Simons Foundation, and now is one of the programs within the Simons Foundation Autism Research Program. It's It's a program that asks individuals to consider providing postmortem donations of brain material in order to carry out research that leads to better understanding of the causes and treatments of autism. So we've been doing this for now a number of years. We've had 146 donations, both of brains from individuals who had autism during life, as well as appropriate control donations as well. And what I wanted to mention is that we've been holding off doing any distribution to researchers until we thought we had a critical mass of cases and controls, but now we do. So we will be announcing in the next few days that all of this tissue will be open to researchers worldwide to carry out research. There's a process, if anybody's interested, on our website, autismbrainnet.org. There's a tissue catalog that itemizes the cases and some of the characteristics that we can release to the public. But researchers can select from that catalog the cases that would be most appropriate for their research and then put in an application for tissue that goes through a peer review process, an independent peer review process. And if it's approved, the tissue is distributed to those researchers free of cost. This is an ongoing process. We're continuing to request donations so that if any of our listeners would be interested in getting more information about Autism BrainNet, please consult our website. People can sign up for a quarterly newsletter. There's no obligation to signing up for the newsletter, it's just information. But we are trying to do our best to get that critical mass of tissue that would allow. So, thank you.
David, other comments or questions? Mr. Stewart?
So going back to the public comment about the association between ultrasound, prenatal ultrasound, and autism spectrum disorder, and so at CDC's Study to Explore Early Development, or SEED, there are data collected from maternal interview as well as medical record on prenatal ultrasound, and SEED has, in addition to those, the case group of children who are affected with autism, two control groups, so children from the population who don't have autism, and then a group who have other developmental disabilities, which isn't a group that's included in most studies, and there are probably prenatal indications for a number of children in those groups to have prenatal ultrasound. So we're looking at the ultrasound data that have been collected and hope to have a report about this in the future.
That would be very helpful. I wanted to make one additional comment that both of these issues raise, right? So, as Kevin suggested, it is hard, if not impossible, to obtain definitive data ruling out certain predisposing factors such as ultrasound, although the data would suggest that if there is any risk, it is extremely small. And we can hope, by using some of these other methods, to be able to gather further correlative evidence that would suggest the risk is indeed small. There's a cost to doing further research to the extent that it is possible. On any of these hypotheses, and this is an issue that I've raised before in response to some public comments about a number of different theories. One thing we don't lack in autism is a collection of hypotheses. What we lack is a collection of hypotheses that are strong enough to pursue. We are now, I should say what we have lacked, we are now in the position where we actually have a fair number of strong hypotheses that are based in excellent correlative data. And this would include, of course, genomics and genetics, but also environmental factors that we can actively pursue. And the question is, with the funds that we have available, which, although growing, we have to acknowledge we can't do everything, do we spend X amount of dollars pursuing a very, very low likelihood with a very, very low impact, the definitive question, for example, of whether ultrasound raises the risk, versus some of the stronger hypotheses that we have available to us. And so, in general, just like a doctor wants to choose the highest impact treatment for the patient, a researcher or someone like myself in charge of setting priorities for research wants to try to choose the highest impact research. And all evidence would suggest that the ultrasound question is a low impact, although, of course, as additional evidence arises, we can revisit that question later.
Having heard about high and low impact research trade-offs and your announcements about the severe autism group, I think that this should really remind us all that while we agree, I think in principle, that there are people who are very severely impacted by autism, and their needs in many cases are very different, for example, than my needs or my son's needs. I don't think there's any doubt that autistic people who are self-injurious and have really serious medical problems or violent, that's a big challenge, and we need to help those people. But I'm concerned that we do not know what the balance is in the autism population. Is this severe group 2%, 5%, 10%, 40% of the autistic population? It's all speculation. And I would urge everyone to be thinking, and I want to take this up in a later IAC, but I would just urge all of you to think about the need for learning more about the profile of the autistic population as we age, so that we can make well-informed, good decisions about how best to help these different populations. I don't think there's any question that help is needed, but how to do it, we need to know more.
Thing went wrong. Nobody said it.
Thank you, John. I think, I don't have the data offhand. I think to some extent we do know some of these things, but we tend to know them rather in limited aspects. So, for example, we know the distribution of IQs in those who are diagnosed with autism from reasonably sized collections. We know there's a range, right? And so, and we know similarly there's a distribution of social functioning in those diagnosed with autism. Although, of course, it's lower than children who do not carry a diagnosis of autism, there is still a range. I think what you're asking for, which is the percentage of individuals who have severe autism, I think that's a really challenging thing to decide because it depends on the threshold you choose. But I will agree with the sentiment a specific disability threshold, or a percentage of those who don't have developed language by age X. I don't know to the extent that we know that, but we might. Kevin, do you have any insight in terms of whether these things are known, or anyone else on the committee?
Well, when I was listening to your comment, what I was thinking about is exactly what you brought up, which is, we know something about the IQ distribution, we know about social symptoms. We know from extensive work on the Vineland as a measure of adaptive behavior, what's a clinically meaningful difference, what's severely impairing. So we've got that data, but it's the other issue you highlighted is it's a shifting definition. What do you mean by severe autism? We used to mean that, or I learned in graduate school, a lower IQ, severe adaptive behavior problems, often presence of seizures and lack of language development. But that even then would be debated depending on where you went to graduate school. So it's sort of, I think the bigger frustration is we don't have, it comes back to John's point, which is defining the spectrum, and it even comes back to John's earlier point about an underlying unity to what we're talking about when we're thinking about autism, so that we're not creating artificial boundaries and pitting groups against each other. And so kind of those two comments I think are interrelated.
Is the autism that Allison described a few minutes ago, is that medically or biologically the same autism that I described in my life? Because certainly I think you would have a very different view if it were as I am, but more impaired versus being a totally different condition at a low biological